Hello, and welcome back to Standby for Adventure. This is John Lighthouser, and I am here today to talk about role-playing games and gaming in general. I found an interesting thing. This is not going to be a long video. I found an interesting infographic from a website called Pixel Learning, and it goes over a lot of what I was talking about in my video about I think it was 11 good things about gaming, or why you shouldn't worry about your kid if they're getting into gaming, or your partner if they're getting into gaming. And really what I'm going to do here is read through this infographic, which has a bunch of great information in it, but it is almost unreadable because it's not really in focus. So I actually went and wrote all of this down, and I will be reading it for all of us to benefit from, because I think it's actually super interesting and useful. The layout on this is not great, right? So we see here we've got rewards, play, mastery, flow theory, engaging, laws of learning, the Goldilocks theory, and there you go. And at the bottom it says, why are games good for learning? This is going to seem like kind of a silly thing to talk about once we actually get into it, because you will quickly realize, like, oh yeah, that absolutely makes sense. Like, why we use games to educate people, why we use games to engage with children, why we use gamification for everything now in the world. So let's read through some of this. I'm going to start on with the red section here. Right by play, and that says in wild horse herds, youngsters that kick up their heels in play are a lot more likely to reach their first birthday. So by inference, they are saying that playing games actually makes you more healthy, it gets you to move around, etc., etc. That's a good thing. Maybe not necessarily true for a role-playing game, but for some games that's absolutely true. There are board games that are very physical. There's obviously, football, basketball, baseball, all of those games also very physical and get you moving. It is another game. There are rules to them. It is a game. Playing is a way to learn, that we learn. Survival skills are learned through play from an early age. This has been proven in animal studies, and you can see that, how cats play with their own babies, or dogs play with their own babies, or wolves, or bears, or anybody, right? They're constantly teaching their babies, and a lot of the play that the younger animals do is mimicking, like playing out the instinctual desire to hunt, or to kill, or to stalk, all that sort of stuff. That all gets done, and even dominance play, right, in different sorts of animals. That's all training for later in life. Using games and play to learn is effective. It's even been proven with humans. A study on surgeons showed that those who played video games were 28% faster at advanced surgical procedures and made 37% fewer errors than those who didn't. So again, that probably has more to do with like muscle memory, but it also has to do with your ability to think quickly and adapt to situations as they change. Baby squirrels that are more playful are better coordinated and go on to make better mothers. Kind of interesting. Now we're down to this flow theory section. Flow theory says this is a state in which the player is fully immersed in the activity. This is achieved by many different emotions combining to achieve the flow state. This is what games strive to accomplish. So when a game is designed well, or when the people who design the game believe it is designed well, it gets you into almost like a fugue state where you lose track of time, because you are being rewarded for your play as you are playing. You are mastering the game, you are figuring things out, you are getting things done, you are figuring out the rules to the game, how to play, how to be most effective at it, and your brain just sort of absorbs all of that because of how it's presented to you. And it's the same is also true of role-playing games. Obviously the physical thing that you are doing is different, but the process, what happens in your head, is the same. Players learn better when they are physically, mentally, and emotionally ready. So, if somebody's had a bad day and you expect them to sit down and be able to just transition right into the game, that might not happen. Give them a few minutes, everybody talk for a little bit, relax, get into the state that you need to be in. The Goldilocks zone, which again is down here in the purple, is to do with challenges within a game. A game can't be too hard or too easy. It needs to be just right. If a game is too hard, most people will give up on it because they can't make progress. They can't get to that level of engagement and mastery that allows them to just go with it, right? Same thing with it's too easy. If it's too easy, you just glide through and there's no challenge to it. There's nothing to it. It just, yeah, okay, I just did the game. Like, who cares? Whatever. Like, it's like tic-tac-toe. There's not really a challenge once you know how to play it. So what's the point? Then we move over to rewards, which is up here on top in orange. Rewards are crucial for motivation. If rewards are given at too regular intervals, then it becomes less rewarding. The goal really for motivation is to do it kind of randomly. Motivation in an experiment, rats who pressed levers and got pellets every time, they were able to eat what they wanted because every time they pushed the lever, they got a piece of food, and they would eat until they were satiated, and then they would leave. There was no game there. It was just like, I click this, I get a thing. I click this, I get a thing. That's not a game. That's just serving yourself food. Mastery comes in when there's mastery is rather an intrinsic reward. So by being good at something, you recognize that you are good at it, and that is its own reward. If you add a random element to rewards, the motivation to keep playing increases. So this explains gambling, right? Slot machines, any dice game, things like that, where you're not exactly sure what's going to happen, and so that makes you pursue those like small percentage differences that indicate success versus failure, right? Like people talk about playing blackjack, and there's like maybe a 5% wiggle room, maybe, in terms of your ability to influence if you win or lose. But over the long run, if you can always max out that 5% in your favor, you will win in the long term. At least that's the theory, right? Because the house always wins. So you have to do as much as you can to tilt the favor in your, or tilt the playing board in your favor. So that's why you also see in computer games why the random element is there. If you hit, if you do enough damage, if you can make that jump, if you can throw the knife over a building and sink it into somebody's head. You've probably all seen those amazingly crazy shots that people have made in video games. It's pretty generally agreed that with 10,000 hours of practice, that's the amount of time required to achieve a level of mastery associated with being a world-class expert in anything. And you'll hear people talk about that when they talk about, musical groups like the Beatles and how much time they performed together when they were younger in Germany, and how they put in that 10,000 hours really quickly, and so they got to that level of mastery when they were very, very young. And that's even, including their practice time, their own personal time mastering their instrument, whatever it happened to be, drum, bass, guitar. But they put in that time, and you will need that amount of time to master any skill in your life. Players are driven to repeatedly practice in games until mastery is achieved. That's sort of why we play games, really. Cat, stop, get off my computer. That's really why we play games. We want to be able to get better at them. We want to be good at them. We want to sit down and be able to not only be good at a game, but be so good at it that it just is relaxing. It just feels good to play it. You know what to do, you know what you're doing, and you can just go and enjoy the experience. Yes, and in fact, that's one of the next things here. Games help you to learn effortlessly by engaging your whole brain. So you're not training one specific thing, you are indeed training your entire intelligence and creativity to learn how to play the game, how all the pieces interact. You do have to use some creativity and some logic at the same time in order to do things within a game, because it presents, in some cases, a fairly real-world simulation of what you're doing. I mean, you're not actually firing a gun at somebody in the game. You're pointing with a cursor and pulling a trigger that's a button, right? But you do have to figure out how to move, how to manipulate your controllers. In D&D or a role-playing game, it would be, you know, how to manipulate the rules to your favor and figure out what would be best to do at this point or best to do at that point. But all that still comes into play. The law of exercise, and that's somewhere down here. Yeah, these are the laws of learning rather. The laws of exercise states that the more we practice and repeat an action, the more we remember. So again, that plays into things like muscle memory, but it also plays into just the whole neural mapping, making connections in your brain, and those things being reinforced and reinforced and reinforced give you mastery, or give you a higher level of mastery. Let's see here. The laws of learning are 7 principles that have been presented as an explanation for why learning games can show such incredible results. And the laws of learning are to exercise, which is just meaning to do the same thing over and over, that there is some requirement you have to fulfill, that you have the freedom to explore and play, that you are ready, so your own readiness to do something, how recently you have done the game or activity, and whether or not you remember everything and if it's being reinforced in your brain, what effect it has, how intensely you play or how intense the game is, and primacy, so how connected you feel to it. So it has to be quite engaging. And then lastly, that is the last thing. Something needs to be engaging. The more intense and interesting the material is, or the game is, the more likely it will be retained. Games that engage you through effective use of visuals, audio, and storyline are more engaging and use multiple channels in your brain. So you are taking the information in through your eyes, your ears, through processing the story, through moving your hands, whether it's on a controller or rolling dice or writing things down or looking things up in a book. You are engaged on multiple levels, and all of that is possible not only in a computer role-playing game, and it absolutely is possible in a computer role-playing game, but all of that is also possible in a role-playing game. And that's kind of awesome, because we can just play these games and get some level of mastery over things like social interaction, math skills, your writing skills, ability to spell, ability to read and comprehend and retain information. All of that is being done when you're sitting around a table playing a role-playing game. So I wanted to bring this up and show this. I'll also put this link in the description of the video if you want to go look at this document and maybe look up some more things about gaming in general. But I'm obviously a big proponent of gaming, and especially role-playing games. I absolutely love them and have been playing them forever. So I'm hoping this is useful, that you want to find out more, that you maybe want to check out role-playing yourself if you are, say, the parent of some kids who started role-playing recently. I think that would be fantastic, and I think it will be enjoyable if you are the sort of person who likes to who likes to tell stories and be involved in stories and interact with people and be social and just have some kind of structure that all that is built around. Just because you're playing a game doesn't mean you don't also get to have other conversations with people around the table. So please check this out. The other thing I wanted to do, and I probably should have done this right at the top of the video, is I'm going to start doing a series of things on Thursdays called THAC0 Thursdays. THAC0, for anybody who doesn't know, and that would be anybody who didn't play D&D in the 70s and 80s, who didn't start in that time period. THAC0 is an abbreviation that stands for 2-Hit Armor Class 0, and this was how D&D used to determine what you needed to roll to hit. And it's sort of an interesting mathematical thing because it's exactly the same now. They just flipped the math around a little bit. So it used to be, instead of saying I have my d20 roll plus my proficiency bonus plus whatever stat, so if I have an 18 dex and I'm first level, I will have a +6 to hit, right? So I roll my die and add 6 to it. And then you just have to hit the other character's armor class. And if that's a 16, that means you need to roll a 10 or higher. There you go. THAC0, and I'm just going to read what this website says. THAC0 is an acronym standing for To Hit Armor Class 0. It refers to the roll required for a character to score a hit on a hypothetical opponent with an armor class of 0, which in turn is used to calculate all other attacks. And that is just absolutely fantastic because it made it so much more complicated than it needed to be. Because then if you were fighting a person who didn't have armor class 0, right? If your THAC0 was 20, which is what it would be at first level typically. In fact, it may even be higher than that. I don't even remember. But if your THAC0 is 20, to hit somebody wearing no armor, you need to roll a 10 or better. That's all that means. And I say that's all that means, but it required this chart that is showing right here because there is enough math involved there that, if you're fighting somebody who has a 4 armor class, then you need to only subtract 6, so you need a 14 or better to hit that. And it was a crazy thing to do with the math instead of just doing it like they do it now, which is everybody has their armor class, and that's the number you want to hit. You roll your d20 and add a bonus to it. They just didn't do that. They just made it a table instead to begin with. If you're curious more about THAC0, give it a look. It's really a funky, weird mechanic. It's very strange to me, and I kind of wonder, and I'm sure this answer is out there somewhere, but where it came from, because it seems like such a convoluted way to determine your armor class. So, or to determine your roll to hit. So I'm going to do more things like this. Every Thursday I want to call up some old rule or thing from an older edition of a game. I'll probably do D&D for a while because there's tons of crazy stuff. And just call that out. But if you're curious about THAC0, and when people refer to THAC0 or THAC0, this is what they're talking about. It was to hit armor class 0 and just the math behind figuring that out. It's a neat thing, and it's certainly one of the things that people who are into the OSR, old school Renaissance sort of gaming, this is the sort of thing they really groove on and think is awesome. And it's really kind of a bass-ackwards way of doing things. But there you go. I played with THAC0 for years, so I'm super familiar with it. I totally get it. But yeah, it's really a silly way to handle what should have been exactly the way we're dealing with it now, which is a die plus a bonus to meet the difficulty of their armor class. That's it. It would have made it so much easier for everybody. That's it for today, and I hope this was useful. I hope you liked the little tips about, or not tips, but information about gaming and why gaming is good and why it is so good for educational purposes and why it's fun. It's a game. That's it. But we can get other benefits out of it that are fantastic and pay off over the course of your entire life. Thanks very much. And yes, I do honestly believe that. I think there are skills you can learn from gaming that pay off over the course of your entire life. I hope you enjoy it. I hope you get a chance to game sometime soon. I'm running D&D tomorrow and the next day. So there you go. Have yourself a good night. Stand by for adventure.